who will win the US Open? That is such a great question at this time of the year since the US Open is the last Grand Slam major of the year. A lot of players coming into the US Open are exhausted, just coming off from the Olympics where they literally had to play a match every single day. Other players are well rested since they skipped out of the Olympics. And I'm really excited to see what this last Grand Slam will bring us. With Novak Djokovic winning Olympics, I wonder how well his performance at the US Open could be. With Alcaraz losing to Djokovic in a final, I also wonder how Alcaraz will perform. And on a women's side, it will also be really interesting to see how Iga maybe bounce back from her loss at the Olympics and how Zheng Qinwen maybe continue her success to the US Open. Welcome, tennis fans, to Tennis Traverse, Exploring the Game, the podcast that delves into the heart of the tennis world. In today's episode, I will be talking about players to look out for in this year's US Open. I'm your host, IBJ. Before we begin, please follow all of my social medias, that is Instagram and Twitter, using @TennisTraverse, that is @TennisTraverse. If you're listening on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other streaming platforms, please rate my show. And let's get right into today's episode. So I want to start off by talking about the women's side first, and then we'll shift gears and talk about the men's side. So to start off, I want to talk about the world number one, Iga Swiatek. So Iga, in my opinion, had an amazing year. She won Roland Garros, which is a tournament that she's completely dominated. And entering the Olympics, I think she had a lot of pressure on her from her country and just from everywhere for her to win a gold medal since it is played in France. And France uses Roland Garros court, which is a clay court, which is the court that Iga is the best on. So there was just a lot of pressure on her, I feel like, and I think that translated into the games. Iga played amazingly until she played against Zheng Qinwen, who later became the winner of the whole entire tournament. So Zheng Qinwen came out there and played. Her goal is to win the gold medal. And Iga just didn't match up to Zheng Qinwen's level. Iga really didn't. She tried, but a lot of balls, they didn't just match up. And Iga made a lot of mistakes that I think isn't like her, and that resulted in her losing 2 straight sets to Zheng Qinwen. So I wonder how Iga will maybe just redeem herself at the end of US Open, because she has a US Open title, so we know that she is capable of winning a title beyond clay courts. And I think this is a great time for her to prove to everyone that she is capable of winning a title on the big stages. And not only in the French Open, but also everywhere else on every other court. Because I think when people think of Iga, people associate her success with the clay courts, which is a major part of her success. But I feel like she's also really successful because, for example, she won the Indian Wells and Miami together, and she had a lot of titles on hard courts, but because of how dominant she is on the clay courts, people just remember her of how she performs on the clay court. And I think winning the US Open maybe will prove to everyone that she is not only dominant on the clay court, but also on hard courts as well. And speaking of Zheng Qinwen, which is her opponent, I'm really curious to see how Zheng Qinwen performs at the US Open. To be honest, she really isn't known for winning Grand Slams or going really far. She has 0 Grand Slam titles, but she did make it to the final of the Australian Open, which is the first Grand Slam this year, and she lost to Aryna Sabalenka in 2 straight sets. So coming off an Olympics victory, I think I'm curious to see how she performs because a lot of eyes will be on her, since I think a common theme in the Olympics is that sometimes it's always won by players that you really didn't expect will win. For example, I didn't expect Zheng Qinwen to go that deep into the tournament, and I'm not taking anything away from her. I just thought that maybe she will be tired because you have to play every single day, and she turned out to prove me wrong, and she did win the tournament. So I'm curious to see how maybe her body, which is probably really tired after competing at the Olympics, how it will carry to the US Open, which is also such an intense tournament because in every Grand Slam, you have to win 7 matches in a row to become the champion. And if you are starting from qualifying, you have to win 3 more matches. So you have to win 10 matches in a row to win the US Open, which is it's really hard, especially because you know that when you're stepping out there, if you lose a single match, you're completely out of the tournament. And to add on to it, it's the last major of the year. So there is a lot of pressure, but I think from the Olympics, maybe she learned how to deal with the pressure of winning, and hopefully she is mentally strong enough to go deep in the tournament and not be a surprising upset. My prediction is she might make it to maybe the quarterfinals or the semifinals, but I don't think she will win this tournament just because coming off of an Olympics, you're extremely tired. And we'll move on to actually last year's winner, which is Coco Gauff. So Coco Gauff is from the US, so because I live in New York, so I went to the Olympics. Sorry, what am I even saying? I went to the US Open last year, and everyone was cheering, of course, for the Americans. And this could be a good thing because obviously the crowd is pumping you and watching you and like always cheering for you. However, the downside to it is because Coco is the defending champion, a lot of people maybe expect her to do really well, to go really far, maybe even defend her title, which is really hard. And an example of this is Naomi Osaka. She won in 2018 her US Open title. She didn't make it far in 2019, but then she won it again in 2020. So it's really hard to defend your title, especially if the whole crowd is cheering for you. Maybe that will like help you or motivate you, but I think a lot of it is it's adding the pressure of you winning, especially if you like you're playing against someone that's maybe isn't high up and came from qualifying. The crowd, where everyone honestly expects you to win, and that could be really hard, especially for example in 2019 the 2 players Emma Raducanu and Leylah Ferdinand. Emma came from qualifying, so a lot of things can happen, especially at the US Open since it is the last tournament of the year. And I'm really excited to see how Coco will do. I think she will go really far because even though she really didn't perform that well at the Olympics, again, I think she's better on hard court. So, and with the crowd behind her, I think she can either use it as more of a positive thing or she can also experience maybe the negative side of it. But still, I think she will do really great. And now we'll talk about her finals opponent of last year, Aryna Sabalenka. So Sabalenka, in my opinion, is one of the players coming in that might win this tournament. So Sabalenka did not play in the Olympics, so she is really ready. I feel like she's been training on hard courts since the people playing for the Olympics are obviously training on clay courts. So I think Sabalenka is ready and she is willing to maybe not revenge, but to claim her title that she obviously wanted so much last year. She won that first set of the final, but she got completely turned over, and I will leave a link for you guys if you guys want to check out the finals highlights. But I think it was one of the best finals I've watched. The whole theme, I guess, for the finals is Sabalenka attacking and then Coco just chasing down every single ball. It's actually insane. I'll leave a highlight, as I said before, but it was such a great final, and I think she is desperate to win that because she already had a set. So she knows how close she was to actually winning the tournament. So again, I think this will motivate her even more to win it. So maybe she is my pick for the number one, for the top winner of the tournament, who can win this tournament. But still at the same time, I need to look at the draws when the draws come out, and I will do a PDF analysis because if she is meeting so many tough opponents in maybe the earlier rounds, she would be exhausted. But I think out of everyone, she is the most ready since she didn't play in the Olympics and she isn't exhausted. And now we'll talk about Naomi Osaka. So Naomi Osaka, obviously, she's won the 2018 and the 2020 US Open. So she's really ready, and I think even though her whole year hasn't been the greatest, she hasn't won any titles, but I think coming off of giving birth, she's done amazing, and I'm happy with how she's doing. And I think the US Open is such a great opportunity to go really deep for her, but I think that could be a pressure that she's putting on herself because obviously she won her first title at the US Open, and I think she loves the US Open courts, and I think it really suits her super well. So I think it will be really hard to see her losing in maybe the earlier rounds, and she definitely will be putting a lot of pressure on herself, or maybe just she expects herself to go deeper than, let's say, Wimbledon and French Open. But I think it will happen, and I'm really curious to see how she does, because I think obviously she's not going to be seeded coming into this tournament. She might be playing against other players that are highly ranked, so it could be a potential upset. And then I want to talk about Ons Jabeur. So Ons was performing actually pretty well coming from Wimbledon. However, the tournament that they are playing right now, which is the Canadian Open, Naomi actually played against Ons, and Naomi won with a score of 6-3 and 6-1. So Naomi was actually more ready, so to speak, in that match. And I think Ons obviously made it to the finals of the US Open, I believe in 2021. In 2022. So I think it'll be interesting to see how she performs. Obviously, her year hasn't been the greatest. She hasn't maybe defended her points as much as she would have liked to, but to maybe go to the semifinals, go to the finals even, it's going to be such a confidence boost from her, and it will be, I think, ending her year off with like a good ending. And now I want to mention just some US players that I think you guys should just watch out for. Peyton Stearns, she's been performing really well. I believe it was last year she made it really deep into the tournament. Amanda Anisimova as well. Obviously she was really good, but she has been struggling with a lot of injuries, but she's actually slowly coming back. I think in the Canadian Open she's making it to the semifinals. Danielle Collins as well. I think Danielle and Emma Navarro are the two players I think I should talk about more. So Collins, this is actually going to be her last year, and she had an amazing year. She won Miami. She's going really far in a lot of tournaments, and I think this might be her chance of maybe potentially making it to the finals or even making it to the semifinals. I think she has the capability of going really deep, just I feel like don't let the pressure get to her will be the biggest determining factor of whether she can go deep or not. And then Emma Navarro, obviously she didn't perform as well as she would have liked to at the Olympics, but I think her game is more suited towards hard courts as well. So same with Coco and Danielle Collins. I think all of their games are more suited towards hard courts. So I'm really curious to see what's going to happen, and I think it's going to be just amazing matches because the US players are actually performing really well, especially on the women's side, because with the Canadian Open that's currently going on right now, and we're going to the semifinals, I believe, and 3 of the women's are from the United States. So for the semifinal, we have Emma Navarro versus Amanda Anisimova, and in the semifinal, we have Diana Schneider versus Jessica Pegula. And I did forget to mention Jessica Pegula, but she is also another player that I think is worth watching, even though her year, sort of same with Ons, hasn't been the best, but she's still keeping her ranking like top. She's still ranked, I believe, number 6 in the world, which is impressive considering she really hasn't had the best year. But I think she is capable of making it really far, and I'm curious to see how the US players do. So I guess that's all for the women's side. We really covered a lot of players that I think are worth watching, and if you guys are coming to Fan Week, I'm excited to meet you guys, and I am going every day of that week. So next week's episode is going to be for the New York people on how to navigate Fan Week and just some tools to use when you're at a Grand Slam tournament. But for now, let's move on to the men's side, and I will share with you guys some thoughts on who might win the men's tournament. So I want to start off with Rafael Nadal. So Nadal, he played in the Olympics. He actually won the first round against Fucsovics, and it was an incredible match. And then he played against Novak Djokovic, which was just, even though the scores isn't close at all, it was just incredible to see two of the big three members playing. It was just incredible. I loved it. It was amazing. It was just, I think it's going to be the last time that they're going to play against each other, which was kind of sad, but at the same time, seeing them play against each other, because it's just so amazing, because they know each other's games so well. They know where the players are going to hit. They know what the balls are going to be like, because they've played against each other for like 60 times now, so they know what the balls are. And to see the players who are just so familiar with each other play against each other for maybe the last time is actually just magical, in my opinion. And now I want to talk about the players who I think, and unfortunately Rafa came out with a post that he is going to be withdrawing from the US Open, and my guess is he's going to be retired at the Labours Cup, which was where Roger retired. So I'm curious to see if he's going to join the Labours Cup or not, but I think that's my theory. So we're missing out on Rafa at this year's US Open, but at the same time, I really wish the best for him, and I'm really sad that I only got to witness, I think, 1 year of him at the US Open. I mean, like, when I was there. So it's really sad, but I think he's done so much. He's won US Open titles, and just I hope that he really have a good life, I guess, after retirement. But now we'll talk about some players I think you guys should watch that might actually have a chance of winning. So Novak Djokovic, I think, is the top player. So in my previous episodes, I talked about how Novak really I believed in him, even though he really didn't have the best year. I still believed that he might win Olympics, and I was right. He did not win Australian Open, he didn't win French Open, he didn't win Wimbledon, and then at the Olympics, I felt that he had it. I felt that he's that's the only title that he hasn't won, so he's giving it all, and it really showed in the final between Novak and Alcaraz. He was chasing down every single ball with a broken knee. It was just amazing, and I think Novak has a capability of winning the US Open, even though, in my opinion, I think it's going to be really slim, because the Olympics obviously took so much off of him or out of him, because he was competing every single day, and he's so old and he has a broken knee. So I think he's obviously exhausted. He withdrew from Cincinnati because, as I said before, he's just exhausted. But I think, as I said a million times before on this podcast, Novak is Novak, and we really don't know what he's going to do. I think a lot of people didn't expect him to win Olympics just because of how his year goes, but I think he's just constantly proving to everyone that you should never eliminate him in whatever your predictions. So yeah. And now I want to talk about Novak's finals opponent at the Olympics, Carlos Alcaraz. So Alcaraz is having an amazing year. He won French Open and Wimbledon, and he beat Jannik Sinner in Wimbledon, and he's just performing really well right now, even though he's the number 2 seed. So Carlos Alcaraz, in my opinion, is really young. He's super talented. However, when he's trying to play tennis in a way that's more performance wise, in quotes, he's trying to hit amazing shots that's not really a shot that, I don't want to word this wrong, but it's a shot that's hard to hit, and he's trying to hit it for entertainment purposes, where it's really hard. When he goes for those kinds of shot, his game sometimes just collapses. And I feel with the finals, him versus Djokovic at the Olympics, he was performing really well, but if you guys watched the tiebreaks, which was the 2-set they played tiebreaks in both sets, and Alcaraz was just nervous. You can tell because he was missing some shots he normally, in my opinion, wouldn't miss, and he was sometimes on the attacking side, and Djokovic was just chasing down every single ball, and he would just make an unforced error because I think obviously he's really nervous. But I think the US Open will be different because he has a US Open title, and even though he really maybe wants to win 3 Grand Slams out of 4 for his year, but I think he's performed really well this year, and I think not winning this US Open title wouldn't take anything away from him. So I think there's less pressure at the US Open compared to the Olympics, but I'm curious to see how he does. And then we'll talk about Jannik Sinner, and in my opinion, he was going to be one of the top players that might win this year's US Open, but it was like using quotes was because, well, he played against Andrei Rublev I think yesterday at the Canadian Open, and he actually injured his hip again, which is really sad because obviously I expected him to maybe win that tournament or go really far because his year is just magical. It's like even better than Alcaraz's, even though he only won 1 Grand Slam and he didn't play the Olympics. So he's coming into the US Open, I feel like completely just relaxed and ready. However, he injured his hip, so that's going to be a factor. I'm not even sure if he might play at the US Open, but for now I will say he's still one of the top contenders. But I think with his hip injury, maybe Alcaraz is just a slight midge on top of winning. But now I want to talk about other players I think might have a chance of winning, even though it's kind of just, I don't know. I think it is going to be between Novak, Carlos, and Jannik, but these players have a chance of winning. So Casper Ruud. Casper obviously have a chance of winning. He made it to the finals, I think, against Alcaraz 2 years ago at the US Open. So he has the capability of making it to a hardcourt Grand Slam final. So even though he has never won a Grand Slam title, I think maybe this year obviously isn't going to be the best year because the draw I think is pretty close. I think it's just going to be between Djokovic, Alcaraz, and Sinner. It's not going to be open, but Casper could still act as maybe a force that could go really deep, maybe to the semifinals. And then Daniil Medvedev too, he's beaten Djokovic at the US Open, which is not really an easy thing to do, and especially in the finals. So I'm really curious to see how he does, even though I feel like he really haven't been doing that well this year. And then Andrei Rublev sort of have a similar feel to Medvedev because he hasn't been doing really well. He had like a four games losing streaks, which is just like completely unlike him. And however, he beat Jannik Sinner at Canadian Open after Jannik injured his hip, which obviously he injured his hip, so it's going to be easier, but like still Jannik is Jannik, so it really doesn't take away from the fact that Rublev beat Sinner. But I guess I just want to say that it is going to be really interesting to see how a lot of players are doing because Djokovic is kind of exhausted and I don't think he's going to maybe go really far, but again, he can prove me wrong. Carlos Alcaraz, I think he is the most likely to win the title out of the 3, and then Sinner, he injured his hip, so I have no idea what's going to happen with him. So as I said, a lot of players that I mentioned might have a chance of winning, and so are some Americans, such as maybe Tommy Paul, I think is the most likely to maybe go far in this tournament. And Tiafoe, I'm curious to see how he does. Christopher Eubanks, I think we haven't heard a lot from Eubanks, but I mean, it's the US Open, so I'm curious to see what's going to happen with him. And I did forget to mention like one player I just remembered, Lorenzo Musetti. I think Musetti is going to perform really well because he has been performing really well. He made it to the semifinals of the Olympics. He made it to the semifinals of Wimbledon. So he is performing really well. And I'm curious to see how he does. But I think that is today's episode. I really talked a lot. This is one of the long ones. But from today onwards, we're going to be talking about the US Open till the US Open ends. We're not going to be diving into other tournaments, even though there are other tournaments that's going on, because I don't know, I just feel like the US Open is such a big part of me as well, since I live in New York and I am going to the US Open, especially for Fan Week. I'm going every single day, so I'm really excited to see you guys if you guys want to DM me, and I'm really happy to meet you guys if you guys are going. And yeah, but I'm super excited, I'm super pumped for the US Open, and I'm really happy that I feel really lucky that there is a tournament, a big tennis tournament that I can just go to. That's like a 30 minutes drive from where I live. So yeah, that's all, and please follow all of my social medias if you haven't already at Tennis Trivers, and I will be more active on Twitter once the US Open starts, because I'm currently working on college apps, so I'm like off every social media now, but I will re-download it once the US Open starts. And if you're listening on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other streaming platforms, please rate my show. I'm sorry if you guys heard the car honking, and yeah, I'll hopefully see you guys next week with just some tools, I guess, you guys can use if you're attending your Grand Slam tournaments for the first time. And yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye!